Would you like to support Cubs Out Loud? One way is to join us over on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, patrons get early access to our shows, the pre- and post-show, and various other rewards. You can learn more at patreon.com/CubsOutLoud. Thanks to all of our patrons for their support in making this podcast. It's Sunday, November 27th, 2022. I'm Jeff.
Who's your bear? That's right. I am your bear.
Did we lose David? Or he's muted?
I'm here. Hi. Sorry. You lost me for a second.
Okay, it's your turn. Where are you?
I'm Dave. Hi.
I don't brew the tea. I just serve it.
And that makes me Gary.
Everyone else is thinking it, and I just say it.
Welcome to Cubs Out Loud, the Bear Podcast, Indeterminate Length, episode number 673. And it's time for Smorgasbord with our Dr. Angelini-Cooke. Yay!
Yay! Yay!
So, what we were talking about today, but...
Oh, no.
Something about a smorgasbord.
No.
What was that?
Bork. No. So help me, I'll pull this podcast and turn it around.
Sorry,
Anyways.
I was just trying to do something for the Swedish chef stuff.
Yes, I figured that out. So, yes, Landscape of Relationships is back, obviously, because Dr. Angelini-Cooke has joined us again and graced us with his presence. So, Ed, this is what that you came up with. You said that you were like, oh, I want to talk about Smorgasbord. And I was like, great. Because I immediately presumed everybody was going to go in the wrong direction and be like, we're going to talk about food and relationships somehow. But that's not really quite what I think we're doing.
Yeah, and if you notice, the title has the umlaut and a little thing over the A, like it's actually spelled. Sorry.
Awesome.
Side comment about
I mean, we're kind of talking about food. We're using an analogy related to food, which I think that, there is a dedicated topic to this podcast for let's talk about food. So, I feel like this is a wonderful pairing of these two topics.
Okay.
What are you gonna say?
No, I believe last month we discussed relationship anarchy. So I'm not quite sure how we get from anarchy to
smorgasbord.
Right.
Well, I thought so this was a topic that I found on a podcast, but kind of with the smorgasbord, which is such a fun word to say. Like in order to talk about this, we had to have talked about relationship anarchy, and I don't think that it would have been, that cool to do both of those in one episode. So let's make this a two-parter. But yeah, so last month we talked about relationship anarchy, and just to, get us up to speed, right? So relationship anarchy is a relationship philosophy developed by Andy Norgren, that suggests that relationships shouldn't really be bound by any rules that aren't agreed upon by the involved parties. I really liked the conversation that we had last month. I thought that was really great. But one of the things that can be difficult is, how do we get there, right? Like, what does that even look like? How do we have those conversations? So in So there was an article called "Your Relationship Needs a Blueprint," and in that article was the first time that it was mentioned about this relationship smorgasbord, which was a concept developed by Lyrica Lawrence and Heather Orr from Vancouver Polyamory. And this has been updated over time to be more inclusive and diverse. So it has gone through a few revisions, and we are currently on the 5th version that was created in January of 2019.
Interesting.
Yeah, so just to kind of, this being an auditory platform, it's going to be a little difficult to conceptualize this, but I'm going to do my best. And also there will be links to examples and PDFs for people to also look at as well. So just to give you a little idea as to the board itself. So like, does anybody know what a smorgasbord is?
It's kind of like a buffet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Way to go, Damon. Yay. Hold on.
Look at that shit. Sorry.
Wow.
Okay.
I got sounds too.
I was just gonna say, look out, world! The doctor has his own like sound cues. Yeah,
the doctor is in.
So for those that may have like thought of it in terms of cuisine, yes, technically, according to Wikipedia, it's a type of Swedish meal. Served buffet style with hot and cold dishes of various types, became internationally known at the 1939 New York World's Fair when it was offered at the Swedish pavilion called the Three Crowns Restaurant. And actually, when I was a young child in my area, we actually had a place called the Smörgåsbord.
Ooh.
And it was a Swedish-based restaurant. And to this day, I am depressed that it went away, just because I remember the fact that it was this old European kind of like feel as an establishment. And now that I think back on it, I don't remember the food too much, but then again, I was like single digits, just wee high. But like thinking of it, I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like if it was, pretty much just a buffet. This is before the other buffets, kind of came around and took over the world. So enough about that. So we're going to talk about like having a buffet of relationships. A buffet
sort
of
of, yeah.
A buffet of like different
a buffet of buffet of options for our relationships. Kind of like a buffet of topics, right? So like if we kind of think about this in terms of, like, I mean, a smorgasbord, right? I mean, I think that we have a visualization of that, but like to bring it over to America, right? Like we can think about it like a buffet, right? We're going to Old Country Buffet or Golden Corral, or like we're making a relationship charcuterie board, right? Like thinking about like a bunch of different things on one area, right? So on the PDF, on the image, right, of the relationship smorgasbord, right, it literally just looks like a giant plate. And on that plate are a number of categories. And at the top of the page, it says, this board includes a number of concepts antithetical to many understandings of relationship anarchy. Not all who use this are relationship anarchists, right? We talked about that last time, that like these are concepts that can be used by everybody, right? And those who may need to discuss how their relational style differs from cultural norms. So these concepts, right? Sometimes we can come to the smorgasbord with a different understanding of what these concepts are. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to say, hey, what is this concept and how are we defining it? What does this look like for us, right? What is the definition of this thing, right? And we'll go over that. But you know, it's really important that we're on the same page. We're at the same smorgasbord, right? Of what we're talking about. And the categories are loose generalizations in order to help conversations, and also arranged with those closest to the center of the smorgasbord as very personal, interpersonal, and those on the outer side as very cultural and what word am I thinking of? Well, from a social work standpoint, they would be like cultural. They would be like systemic stuff, right? And all right. So here's how this works, though, is in order. So when we have a relationship, you know, whoever is comprised of that relationship, right, comes to the smorgasbord, and we pick any of the number of items, right, or platters on this plate. We can take a huge helping, or we could just take a little bit, right? But what is important to remember is that the dish, that the amount of people who is at the smorgasbord is holding is your relationship, right? This is for you, and we have to agree together on what this is that we're holding. And we also cannot, and I know it's really going to be difficult, but we can't sneak items in without the other person knowing. So I know that you're going to want all of those gherkins to yourself, but no, sweetie, no. Sharing is caring in this,
Right.
with this analogy. Because if we don't, then there's going to be conflict. And while conflict in every relationship is normal, we don't need like unnecessary conflict, right? This is
Right.
like, this is conflict that that is, yeah, that's added conflict. We don't want that.
Yeah.
And it can also make room for disappointment, right? The other thing to remember is it's your dish, right? It's your smorgasbord. So you decide what's there, and you decide what you want on your smorgasbord. And if you want to change it later, that's totally cool. You can, it's yours. Right? Does that make sense? Are we all on the same page?
Yeah. Making sense to me because it makes it. I like this idea of like you both kind of come to the table or come to the smorgasbord holding one plate. It's not two plates. It's one plate. Is
One
that
plate.
kind of what I'm getting at it? So two or more people, depending on what relationship dynamic you're in, are carrying a plate, and then each of you can kind of go through and pick what you want from these items or topics. So
Right? Like,
at
do we
the end
want
of
some
the
of
day,
this? Do we want some of that?
right. So at the end of the day, you know, you both have to agree on this. And guess what? You're both eating everything that's on the plate. Like, you know, I'm thinking like Thanksgiving dinner, since this was just recently Thanksgiving, like a Thanksgiving dinner, like you have to eat because you both agreed on this, you're going to eat everything on the plate. So, and if you find yourself unable to eat something on the plate, you're going to have to talk about it and figure out why you can't eat what's on the plate because you both kind of originally agreed to put it on the plate.
Yes,
Does that make sense?
mother.
I think the only thing that I would counter is that sometimes I may not want something that is on the smorgasbord, right? But you know, somebody that's in my relationship does really want that, and I don't have to eat it, right? Like, I just have to be willing for it to be there,
Got
right?
it.
Well, I think that's interesting, Ed, because it's what I've been pondering this whole time. Is I'm like, well, but what if your partner wants this one thing and you really don't want it?
Right. Like, I don't, I think that there's going to be some times where that's the case, right? Like, I am sure there are things at the smorgasbord, because I'm a picky eater, that I don't want. But like, I know that like Jim loves everything. So, I, have to be willing to say, hey, I'm okay that this is on the plate, right? But like sometimes though, there's going to be some stuff that he wants to put on the plate that I'm like, no, man, no, I don't want that stank ass fish on this plate because it's going to touch with everything and I'm going to be very unhappy. So that's why,
Right.
we have to, like, that's where we have to agree.
It's an interesting analogy.
Well, I mean, it makes sense.
I'm the king of metaphors.
I like the idea of like this rank ass fish. I love that because it's like, yeah, I don't want that on the plate. I don't want it near the plate. I don't want it in my house. Like that kind of like feeling of, because once it, like you said, once it's there, it kind of permeates everything, and
really
that could be a problem. And that's where we're going to have a hard no, or at least we're going to really need to talk about it for me to agree to allow that to come in proximity of our relationship plate. Like we're going to have a really in-depth conversation. So it might get cold, but hey, at least we're having a conversation about it.
Yeah. So I think that, as we kind of go through this, we'll see how those conversations can happen. Right. So like, so here are the categories, right? So currently on the relationship, the smorgasbord image, right, is, and I'm going to go from the center to the outside. So we have physical intimacy, kink, emotional intimacy, power exchange, partnership, sexual, romantic, collaborative, professional / work, creative, co-caregivers, companionship, playfulness, public displays of affection, emotional support, communication, financial, legal, power / hierarchy, exclusivity, caregiving, religious / spirituality, labels / terms, systems of oppression, and within each of these categories are related items. Okay, that all makes sense?
Yeah,
it's a lot, right? Like
there's a lot there.
And I know that's why, Ed, you were talking about earlier, like in this kind of medium, it would be difficult for people who aren't seeing the visual to understand like the relationship and like how there's all these kind of plates, so to speak, or different items. And then within them, it breaks down examples of what those things can be.
Right.
Yeah. So just kind of keep it in your mind. Like you're at, what was the name of that place? Sizzler, right? Is that the name of the place? Sizzlers?
There's a place called Sizzler that has a buffet that is well known. Mostly, I guess the United States more would know what that is. When you say Sizzler, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh no, I'm saying Sizzler.
Yes.
Sizzler.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, is that what you were saying? Okay.
Yeah, it's a Sizzler. It's a restaurant chain.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, they used to be over here. I thought that they closed down all of them.
They have closed most of them. I think there are a very few, if any, in the United States. And I think Gary is looking it up now as I've tried to look it up as well.
I think they're regional, right?
Of course. Right, but like...
Yeah. No, I mean, but they it's not something that a lot of people necessarily would know, but yeah. Interesting. Mostly on the West Coast, it looks like now.
Oh, okay.
California, Washington, Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Idaho, Utah, Oregon, Alaska, and Puerto Rico. Because, like, Puerto Rico is totally something that would Makes sense. Anyways.
I just remember in the 80s and the 90s them having like really top-notch commercials that really made me want to go to Sizzler. So just keep it in your mind, right, that we're talking about a like a giant buffet, right, where there are so many options, right? And I know that some people here even go to Las Vegas, right? So, buffets are a really big thing out there. So, just keep that in your mind, right? So, so also think about the fact that like you're not going to necessarily want everything that's there, right? It's okay for you not to want some of these things. But like, in a relationship, right, we have to talk about what we want, right? Or, like, have you ever been at like a buffet and you're like, what is that? Right? I can't tell what that is, right? And then it becomes this whole discussion thing, right? Oh, I think it's potato salad. Nope, that's coleslaw, right? So, kind of with this, right? Like we get the opportunity to kind of find out what this thing is for us, right? And because, if we're looking at it, romance, right, may be different for you than it is for me. So, we need to figure that out, right? So romance to me might be you picking me up flowers, on a Friday night, right? For you, it may be cuddling on the couch, watching a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if we don't talk about that, then, we're not going to be looking at the same thing. So that's what it looks like, right? And when we're doing this, right, what we can do is we can sit down together and be in a place, right, where we're okay to talk about these things, right? Like it's not a good time to talk about these when we're hungry or angry or lonely or tired, right? We have to be in a place where we are ready to have this conversation. And it's a good idea to kind of look at this image and kind of pick a specific plate, right? And that's where you can define what that means for both of you, right? And under that category, either, there's a lot of things that you could do. You can either say, yes, I want this. Maybe, right? Maybe in the future, let's talk about it. Or, immediately no. Absolutely no. That is where the stank fish, that's where that comes in. And, like, what? Yeah, veto. And that's where, like, the other suggestions that they give is like color coding could be cool, or highlighting. Like I tell people, just have fun with it. Just have fun.
Yeah, it's rather interesting as I kind of look through some of these ideas, and these are the plates, as it were. As I'm kind of looking through it, and I'm kind of like, oh, these are things even in my relationship now, it's kind of like, oh, some of these we don't really give a lot of, maybe there's not an opinion, but we've never talked about it before. Maybe we've not had a reason to really think about it because maybe we are under this impression that we're already on the same page with it, but maybe we're not. That makes sense,
I like kind of how under this sex category, when it says kissing, making out, and then manual, oral and genital, like manual. That's a way of saying it.
They're talking
not
about
normal way
hands,
of actually. Well, I know what it means. It's just never really heard it as manual. Not commonly, but general. But that makes a little more sense.
Anyway,
not jazz hands. I mean, that's an option. It's just not listed currently on the document. You'd have to add it to your.
Well, you know, maybe
plate.
it's like
Okay, so for the record, I'm just going to say this and totally like turn this vehicle sideways for a brief moment. We're going to go down the dirty alley. So help me, in the midst of having sex, someone pulls out jazz hands? No. Like
turn off.
Yes, like we're stopping. Even if you think it's funny, no. Just no.
No, usually in those cases, it's more of hands on appropriate body part and usually pushing inward into my body or pushing me into their body. I don't know, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, after the big finish, if you think that's appropriate because like you want to like, you know, have a boosted ego for the moment about how well things ended.
Oh, that was so good.
Right. Standing ovation. That's a little different. But in the midst of things, no.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, Bill. Jazz hand when you hit the big O.
Right. Can I have a show of hands? How are we doing so far?
10 out of 10.
Oh no.
That would be a little difficult if you're into FF play at the moment. I'm just gonna say.
Oh.
No, please don't. No.
How many fingers am I holding up?
Anyways.
But no, See, now you got me on the track and now my head. Nope, can't bring it back.
Yep. So anyways.
Trying to rein it back in. Okay.
Good luck.
Go ahead.
So that's the tool there, right? And you know, you can have a lot of fun with it, but I think the important thing is that you just do it, right? Like you talk about how you want your relationship is, and you know, let's not make assumptions that the other person is at the same smorgasbord.
Right.
Right. We have to know what we're talking about. We have to know, you know, what the other person thinks. Like, have you ever had those? Well, and also with Matilda coming out, which I'm very, very excited about.
Matilda,
you know, like Matilda, the musical.
That's also based on a movie called Matilda.
I'm waiting for you to finish this thought and explain it because I am not following you. So
you're not following it? Okay.
No. What does this musical have anything to do with this conversation?
Okay, I'm getting there. So in the musical Matilda sings this song called Quiet, and in this song she says, do you ever think about when I say blue or red, that we may be thinking of like the different things, right? Hold on. Let me get the lyrics up here because that would be important. Quiet Matilda lyrics. Load, please. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to read them for you. Have you ever wondered, well, I have, about how when I say red, for example, there's no way of knowing if red means the same thing in your head as red means in my head when someone says red.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is like, if you're going to have a serving of something, you both want to have the same definition of that topic of that serving. Otherwise, you're not actually both thinking of the same thing together at the same time.
Exactly. You may be like munching and chowing down on like two different things.
I'm using the plate and food image. That's what my head is going, Karen. I know immediately where you went.
Okay. Anyways.
Like, funny you should phrase it that way.
sometimes be on.
I'm just saying for anybody who's like listening more so than maybe watching, you may like end up finding like double entendre stuff all over the place in this episode. Anyways.
And that's, you know, like, but, you know, when, you know, one of the plates at the smorgasbord is kink, right? It's really, really important that we are on the same page when it comes to what certain things mean.
Right.
You know, that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think the same kind of conversations we need to have with other things, right? So, like, the one plate there is communication, right? So, like, I may have, you know, communication may be for me daily, right? It may be asynchronous. It may be text message. It may be phone call, right? But, you know, we have to figure that out, and we have to be on the same page with that, so that this way I don't get upset when, say, you don't call me every 5 minutes. Gary, why haven't you called me every 5 minutes? Very upset about it.
Well, I'm sorry that you have expectations you didn't communicate to me.
Oh, you mean when I say blue? That's not what you mean?
Well, are you saying BLEU or BLEW or BLUE?
I love BLEW.
Who doesn't appreciate the wind? Anyways.
Oh, God.
Interesting. So Philip says in the live chat, like when someone says steak, one person can be imagining a rare steak and the other person could be imagining it well done. Both are technically steak, but they are very different.
Yes.
Bravo, Philip.
But it's true. You know, the kink one is the kink plate is rather interesting to me. Because I'm remembering a time long ago, Jim and I tried adding that dynamic into our relationship, and it failed miserably. And the main reason it failed miserably is because we already had this established, like for a while, like relationship dynamic that we had already kind of agreed to, and all those things, and we were trying to add this other layer on it, and things conflicted.
Right.
You know, certain things I would not have to ask to get permission to do that I now had to ask to get permission to do, but I shouldn't have to because of the relationship. So it became this very odd, like, sequence of things that just did not work. And he'll say I'm very independent, which I will agree with. I cannot just take you telling me to do something. I kind of need to know why I'm doing it. And it can't be because I said so. No, that doesn't work for me. In that scheme, in certain aspects, if I were in a certain space mentally, I might be okay to go along with things. But I need more information. I need more data in order to kind of make those choices. And where we were at that point in time, that was not a good place to kind of add this other dynamic to.
Right. I think it's interesting that you mentioned and you focus on the kink one, Damon, because that to me correlates and goes back to the earlier conversation, the analogy about the stinky fish. Out of all the things that I see here, to me, that's probably the stinky fish of all the options that people probably would like say is problematic because it would affect the other things. I'm not saying that that's always the case, but to me, that seems the most likely out of everything I'm looking at here of these options and lists. I mean, and a close second, I think, would be power exchange. I think that these are things that like you're describing, people would have challenging times differentiating between like the play, quote unquote, the role play versus the relationship, and how does that matter for people? Like I'm thinking about a couple that I know that to my knowledge, their entire relationship has been built from the beginning on the concept of the smorgasbord, and they made decisions as they went along because they have a very successful, to my knowledge, a successful romantic relationship, but also a kink power exchange relationship at the exact same time. And one is definitively the dom, one is definitively the sub, and they are both completely content with that. And from an outside perspective, people might have issues with it, but both of them are kind of like, well, that's your issue, not ours.
I mean, true.
Right. And I was one of those that was on the outside. I was like, how does that work? But what was happening was, as I realized as you were talking, Damon, I was projecting my independence as an only child who has had to pretty much always do everything in some fashion. Like you just do it. So like to have someone give you like limitations or boundaries or borders or, can be challenging because you're like, what the hell do I, what? No.
Yeah.
Like I just do what I do.
And it matters. It would be different, like you said, if things had kind of been established from the beginning.
Right.
And yes, relationships can grow and change and all that stuff. I understand that. But when you've kind of set this boundary, and that has been not boundary really, because it's not really a boundary. You've set this dynamic. Dynamic, thank you, beforehand. And then it's an immediate, almost immediate, like 180 shift to go from something kind of open and free to now restricted and needing permission. It flipped it on its head, and it made, it changed a lot of things, and it worked for a little bit, but then it fizzled. Not really fizzled. It kind of just stopped, mostly because we realized, while we appreciated this aspect, I don't think either of us really wanted it to go that into the depth that we wanted it to, or needed at that time. And and it was best to be like we're just going to stop now. But we found other outlets for it. Like he has a boy now that he can have those dynamics with, and I know about it, and I'm aware of it, and I'm okay with it. So he kind of has that outlet for those, for what I think he needs for that kink dynamic to work.
He has a separate plate.
Yeah, he has a separate plate, which is okay.
There you go.
Like sometimes you have a big like dinner plate, and then sometimes you have a little dessert plate on the side, or a side salad. Like it's perfectly okay, and that works for us.
Right. I mean, like when we talk about like the stinky, the stinky ass fish, right? It's like, okay, well, this is stinky ass fish. I don't want it on this plate, right? It's totally fine that you have that, right? If you could just please have that on its own plate, so it's not infecting.
Affecting.
Yeah.
This like this plate. So sorry, my.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Siri was yelling at me.
How dare they?
Damn it, Siri.
How dare they? But So, to use the other, what I think is really interesting on here is they have power/hierarchy, they have professional/work. So what I also really love about this is we can use this tool with not just romantic relationships or sexual relationships, or we can also use this with work relationships. We can use this with friendships, right? I think that a lot of friendships end because of expectations that were not communicated.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that.
Right. And like how we're going to interact, right? Like how many times are, hey, I don't like this. I don't like the way that you speak to me when we're in public, right? Or, I don't, I don't, I think you call too much. I don't think you call enough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, there's room for these conversations with every single relationship that we have. Even with our boss or employees, right? What is me being a boss mean to you, right? What does you being an employee mean to me? What does power mean to you? What does power mean to me? How does that show up for you? Do you think that that's going to be a problem, right? So and these are conversations that I have with my clients, right? I personally take a low power approach with my clients because I find that me assuming the power role affects how somebody shows up in the room with me.
Interesting.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't know if I ever really thought about it that way. But then again, this goes back to, goes back to a great many things. But the first thing I think of is like the failure of our society / I think it's, depends on how far you want to take the levels. But anyways, I just think in terms of the education that we give to people, this is lacking for people to understand these kind of like dynamics and concepts and ideas that are out there. And so people are in relationships, but they are troubled relationships, problematic. I don't know if I want to go quite as far to say that they're abusive, but they're like, they're not good, positive, established ones, I guess is the way I want to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, the whole friendship thing I feel is a big one, because I think some people make expectations on things, but they don't ever explain them. Like we have friendships, we have people that want, like, I want to talk to you every day, or I want to talk to you every other day. And they don't say that. And then when you don't reach out or call or whatever for a week or so at a time, they suddenly get all snippy, and you're kind of like, well, why? Well, I hadn't heard from you until just now. But I'm like, I didn't know that you needed me to be like calling you constantly or reaching out to you constantly. Are you doing the same? Like if it was, I'm messaging you every like other day and you're just not responding back. Yeah, okay, that could be a little sucky, but I don't know that you need me to do that all the time unless you tell me.
Right.
Well,
it's
and that also opens.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. We're at an impasse. No, I was just going to say, and then that ends up into another really cool conversation about. I just lost my train of thought. Is that something that you need? Okay, cool. I can't do that. That isn't that, like, I don't want that on our plate, right?
Mm-hmm.
That isn't something I can agree to. That's an expectation that I can't live up to. So, what does that mean for our friendship?
Yep.
Right. So Philip said in the live chat, would you say that communication has to be on everyone's plate? It seems like that is always a key point in every relationship.
Yeah, communication. I don't think that we can have relationships without communicating, whether that's verbal, nonverbal.
So that kind of makes me wonder, Ed, like all these options, what I'm finding interesting is there isn't really a hierarchy like established to say these are required and these are optional. And the reason why I'm phrasing it that way is because of Philip's question. Like, as I read it and I was thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I would agree. Like, I think communication is the bedrock of any relationship, period. You can have good communication. You can also have not very good communication. So that, you know, dynamically will end up playing out as to how positive an experience that relationship is for all the parties involved. So that's where I was like, I think it's interesting. I think it starts to take it in a three-dimensional area that people might find difficult to understand because all the visual representation that we'll have later on the Cubs Out Loud blog is two-dimensional. Do you know what I mean? So everything's kind of on a flat plane. And I feel like communication is like something that should be like, I don't know if I want to say required. It's just there automatically, no matter what. It's not an optional thing.
I actually, okay. So here's the thing, though. So I'm so glad that this is being brought up, though, because sometimes communication isn't an option. And sometimes so I think that, you know, to use that example, right, with friendships or whatever, you know, there may come a point in a relationship where we can't communicate anymore. Like I think about, you know, relationships or friendships that have just grown distant, right? So like the rate of communication is very low, right?
Right.
But that still doesn't mean that we don't have a great relationship. Like there are people that I don't talk to them, right? But like I still love them very dearly. Right. And I don't have plans to talk to them. Right. Like, you know, I think about, you know, high school friends or whatever. Right. Like they're just not in my orbit. Right. Or if there is some kind of like physical thing that is getting in the way of communication. Right. Like, I don't know. Incarceration or something, or you know, and maybe communication just isn't an option, right?
Well,
then I think that can be a conversation. That's, you know, before that, obviously, right?
I
or
think,
even just like a sense of awareness that, like, hey, we're not talking. Is that okay for me?
but what you're describing, though, Ed, to me is all about frequency. Whether the frequency changes because of barriers, because of space, because of whatever, fill in the blank. It's just the frequency that's changing.
Right.
So say like you have two individuals and one of them is incarcerated. It's not that they can't communicate. The frequency of the communication changes. The method of the communication would change. Not that communication would not happen.
And sometimes.
Yeah. It's a hard thing to, like, I think quantify or say it. Like, I get where no communication could be a possibility in a relationship. Like, it feels weird, but it's there. I'll put a perfect example. He passed away, but me and my father, like, we barely talked, if at all. There's a relationship there because of blood and familial ties, but before he passed, I mean, even, you know, we barely talked to each other. And I think it was on both of our sides, that kind of strained-ish kind of thing. where I didn't necessarily want to broach conversations with him because that would mean talking about myself and him maybe finding more things out about me that I wasn't ready for him to know. But did we still have the random communication? Yes. It was, to be blunt, it was at my level of comfort, not necessarily at his. There would be calls that it would be intentionally missed because I did not want to have a conversation with him, or he would for some reason know the exact moment to call when I'm in the middle of something with other people and could not be, not that kind of middle of something. Let me put that out there. But other, like, just like out with friends, and he would call, and it's like I don't really want to have that conversation because it would break what I'm doing right now. And I would call back. I couldn't text because he didn't have that capability, and he didn't have email, so I couldn't do it that way. So all of our conversations were done over phone, which is not my main cup of tea when it comes to communication. Like, text me, email me. I'm much better with that than actual like conversation from the phone conversation. But we did eventually have those talks, and they almost always revolved around kind of the same things, that are things that I didn't really want to have a conversation about because it had nothing to do with my personal life or my life in general. But we would I would have to, and I say that have to have those conversations with him because I felt it was at least a way to maintain that relationship. Do I wish we had had more opportunities to do things and actually spend time together? A little bit, yes. But there's also a part of me that wasn't ready to embrace that potential fallout, because as I was getting closer with Jim and with Jim and us building our lives together, it was like things were becoming, I would have conversations with people about things and it would start becoming we. Like when Jim and I moved in together, a lot of things that were like I'm doing in my place became we're doing in our place. And therein lies I'd have to do the mental gymnastics whenever I would have a conversation with him to like not give too much away, because I's became we's, and that meant that opened the door that I was not quite ready to open.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
So yeah, I think that these are like some examples, right, of how communication can be like a barrier, right? But for I think really proximal relationships, right? Like really close relationships, communication is very important and needed in order for a relationship to move into a place where to grow.
Right. So I guess my question then, Ed, is where do we go from here with the smorgasbord?
Well, I mean, use it, right? I think that try it out, right? Sit down with somebody and say, hey, where are we with these things, right? As we were kind of talking, I was thinking about even in queer friendships, right? I think that, and especially, I don't want to make a generalization here, but with like bear friendships, right? Sometimes there is the saying, hey, is sex going to be part of our friendship?
I find that interesting that you called that out, because I think in some circles it's sort of presumed or a given that our circle of friends, everybody intimately knows each other. Like, I saw this posted on social media recently. It actually made me laugh aloud, because it said, "Baby, never ask how each of us gays knows each other. You don't want the answer."
I
And
mean,
right, and it made me laugh because it made me realize what they were inferring is like,
Honey, we fucked.
right,
We
like
fucked.
we all done the deed. That's how we know each other.
When we say we know each other, we know each other.
we know each other, right?
Right.
Mm.
But like, you know, and that's very true, right? A lot of gay relation or got a lot of gay friendships, right, started in the bedroom. And but like that doesn't mean that they always will, right? Like, you know, I have a lot of friends that, you know, we started out as a hookup, but then that could have been the last time that we fooled around.
Right.
You know, we just became friends after. So, you know, maybe, and sometimes you'd be surprised, right? If you sit down with one of your friends, right, that you don't say have a sexual relationship with, and you present them with this, and it's like, hey, you know, in our relationship, in our friendship, what of these things do we want on our plate, right? And they may be like, I would love to have sex with you, or, you know, I would love, you know, and that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's
I think it's a
funny.
conversation that doesn't happen very often. Like I was saying, I think it falls into two camps. It's either a presumed thing or it just is never discussed.
Right.
I've had it's funny. I was thinking about it because I just went home for Thanksgiving, and I was like, do I have any like friends that I could just hang out with? And I was like, I probably do, but I have to go through my mental Rolodex of like people I've, you know, like I've met and people I've met and kind of be like, okay, where do we go from there? And I was like, it was Friday. It was Friday. Actually, it was Wednesday when I got there. My mom was asking me, like, are you going to do anything like on Friday? Because she knew that would be the night that I would not have anything planned. And I was like, I really don't know. I haven't really given it much thought. And normally I would have, but I gave it a little bit of thought and kind of slowly realized like the friends that I know that I would want to go out with or do something with, most of them have moved away or have very busy lives that, like, you know, to be blunt, I don't feel like, hey, I happen to be in town this one night that you might be doing something, or you might not even be in fucking town. Like, do you want to do something? Like, I'm not the person that would kind of reach out for that, especially knowing like everyone's, you know, we're all kind of living our own lives and things.
Right.
But the thought did cross my mind, and I thought about reaching out to a couple of people, but then I changed my mind and I said, you know what? I could try to, you know, get something together to make something happen, or I could just go out on my own, which was a possibility, but I changed my mind about that later on. And I was like, if nothing else, I could just go sit somewhere and I'm sure I'll see people that I know in one way or another if I had gone out, because that's the way we are. But I like kind of thought about it more, and I was like, I don't. The friends I know there, most of them have moved away, and for one reason or another, are just not as accessible. So I was kind of like, yeah, it's been, and you know, I'll blame it on COVID, but that's the, you know, big thing. But a lot of things were just general. I haven't really talked to these people to do something of this caliber, even though it's something as simple as just going out on a Friday night.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, Damon, because I'm thinking about how it's kind of known around the holidays like the weekend of the holiday or right before the holiday is kind of the homecoming, quote unquote, that people return home because it is the holiday and they're getting together with stuff. And so you get on the apps and then you're like, oh, haven't seen them in like, XYZ, whatever it is, because they moved away or whatever that is. I saw somebody post on social media, it cracked me up in the past day. They were like, never would have guessed in a million years that I would have hooked up with someone I went to school with. Like, and so like, they didn't say much else other than that, but I put two and two together and was like, oh, you went home, ran into someone you went to school with, y'all had fun. You just didn't have that on your bucket list or any expectation, so to speak.
Right. It wasn't at your smorgasbord.
Right.
But maybe now it is.
Maybe now it is. Right. But like, I have a really good friend that like is, constantly always like, hey, I really would love to have sex part of our friendship. And I'm like, using some of these suggested notations, it's like maybe in the future, right? Just not now.
Right.
I think it's interesting, Ed, that you bring that up, because I'm thinking about how I recently learned of someone. So I'm with friends and they mention a name out of the blue. And I was like, why do I know that name? So then I put two and two together and it clicked and I pulled up their information on my phone and I was like, oh, that's who you're talking about. And it was really funny because we sort of had a subverted side conversation about this person. But I was like, I didn't even realize that y'all like ever communicated, but that's because this person has a pattern of reaching out and communicating with people. And I called it out at the table and said, in my opinion, stay away. This person has things going on in their life and they consistently reach out because they're not facing whatever is going on in their life. I don't know what it is, but I'm just saying, as a friend to you, as like a chosen like family member to another chosen family member, girl, stay away.
Oh.
Do it, Damon. Do it.
But to me,
there you go. Yay!
But to me, I had to say that because I think my concern is I don't want this to be on your smorgasbord. Like I kind of got the impression that this was not an option, but I'm like, please don't make it one. And this is a jealousy issue. This is I'm looking out for you issue.
Gary, you and I would need to have a conversation because I think I know who you're talking about, and I'm having this like there's a buzzing in my brain. And I'm like, do I? Oh, I might, and I'm kind of like,
okay.
About it all.
Well, that's for the
later
COL after
midnight,
whatever you call anyway.
That.
After dark.
Yeah, I agree. So kind of like, I guess, to wrap up this thing, I do like this metaphor analogy, concept of a smorgasbord and having this be a topic of discussion between partners in a relationship, as it were. I think it's important because if you're both kind of, like you said, we're both kind of eating from the same plate. And it's imperative that you both kind of have the same, I don't want to say appetite, but at least want to try or have some of the things that are on the plate. And as we've mentioned, the stinky fish kind of thing, the rank fish kind of option, those things don't necessarily have to be off the plate. They can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean, like you said, it doesn't really mean you both have to eat it. Sometimes it's just a matter of being okay with it. Or respectful.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. There you go.
There you go.
Sounds like we've cleaned our plates here.
Wow. That was.
Anybody have any leftovers?
mean, I don't know.
Look, I got to get some sort of puns in the show. Any case, it sounds like that's the end. Oh. Tell us what's on your plate. What sort of smorgasbord do you have? You can tell us in various ways. You can do that over on our website, cubsoutloud.com. Leave a comment on the blog. You can also shoot us an email at cubsoutloud@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 361-COL-TALK. That's 361-265-8255. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Cubs Out Loud in the appropriate place of the URL. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also join our Entourage chat and chat us up directly at tinyurl.com/telegram-COL. If you would like to know when we're planning on recording these shows, you can find out at our Google Calendar at tinyurl.com/calendar-COL. You get various accoutrements, such as a Consent is My Foreplay shirt in various different styles, hats, etc. All at our store at zazzle.com/cubsoutloud. Some of those designs, such as the Consent is My Foreplay, was done by Smashy, which you can get more of his work at tpublic.com/user/SmashyTheBear. You can also become a patron of the show at patreon.com/cubsoutloud, or send us a little bit of money as a donation at paypal.me/cubsoutloud. You can find us on various podcast directories such as Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon, Audible, and Spotify. You can find me anywhere in the internet as Box, Puppy Box, Cub Box, something or other, or Windgem, WYNDGEM on Twitch, where I stream bears and dragons when I'm not feeling very low on energy. Damon?
If you wish to get in touch with me, you can find me as TheaterCub79. That's TheaterCub79. On most beer-related sites are on Facebook. Or you can find me as pup_Umbra on Twitter. The Twitter is definitely not safe for work. Gary?
If you would like to find me anywhere online, pretty much type in GareBear73. That's GARBEAR73. And Dr. Edward, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they do so?
You can find me on Facebook as Edward AC. My business website is eactherapy.com if you want to contact me. I'm on TikTok as dr.unicub79 and Instagram dr.unicub_sexbrainwizard. And you can find me on Twitter as Eddie H. Cook, or for some, not safe stuff, Dr. Unicub After Dark. I don't know how long I'll be there.
Well, you'll be able to update us in later shows. And with that, say good night, everybody.
Good night.
Ciao for now.
Bye.